Terry Liggins, Heart of Life coach. Oh, let's see if it didn't start yet. All right, we are live. Terry Liggins, Heart of Life coach, here for another recap discussion about the For Life video series episode on ABC. We've been doing this for 10 weeks now. This is actually the 11th week of the series going on. I remember getting word about this new ABC series after it had been airing for about a week already, and we decided to jump right on the opportunity to have to leverage this series, this episode, this entertainment, if you will, as an opportunity for us to talk about what matters to us here at Hurdle Life. At Hurdle Life, we very much target and produce, develop, work to build relationships with stakeholders in our community that are serving and supporting vulnerable adults in transition, particularly individuals who are formerly incarcerated, people who are homeless and transitioning into self-sufficiency, or any type of other adverse experience that can happen in childhood or as an adult. Life is one big transition. Even in the midst of this COVID-19, so many things have been shaken up and changed, and we are all called to a real human strength of ours, which is adaptation. All of us are called into this time right now to be adaptable, to be resilient, to find a way to navigate these uncertain and unprecedented times that we're in. And so for us at Hurdle Life, we also know that this time is a great opportunity for us to reach other people as well who are in transition, who are working through hard times, but particularly, as mentioned, heart beating for the formerly incarcerated. This series For Life is a drama that's based in the life of a guy named Isaac Wright Jr., and he was convicted to life in prison, became a prison rep, passed the Virginia bar, applied for reciprocity in New York, and end up becoming the prison rep and lawyer. The whole thing is that he wants to litigate himself out of his own false conviction. I've mentioned this before in other streams that I don't know how the story ends, and I'm really starting to wonder, does he really get what he started this whole process for? I literally haven't done the research into like what happened with Isaac Wright Jr. at this last episode being what I just saw. I don't know if the guy's gonna make it. They showed what the season finale looks like, and he does make it, but the guy just got hit in the head with the weight and didn't look alive at the end of the episode there. So I'm starting to really wonder how this thing ends, and if I'm going to really need to do that additional research to truly discover what happens with the Aaron Wallace story. This episode was very different. The last two episodes have been very different. They focused a lot more on what it's like inside the walls. The whole purpose of this recap and discussion program was to not only discuss what we saw or what I see in the episodes, but to use the episodes in the series as a way to discuss some of the active ways that we can advocate for reform measures, transformation measures within our justice system. That we would be able to look at the things that they highlight in the episode, things that are happening in the courts, things that are happening with family, things that are happening in the prison, and evaluate them objectively, to take an objective lens and take a look at some of the behaviors, mannerisms, conduct, laws, procedures, protocols, precedents that are in place, and ask ourselves, Are we okay with it? Are we satisfied, and are we raising our voice and advocating for change? And so certainly we here at Herd of Life recognize that our justice system is definitely, certainly has plenty of places whereby we can have conversations about reform and change. The justice system in its components is law enforcement, courts, and corrections. This series again shows us a lot about what's going on in corrections. Again, most of these series have been highlighting things that are happening in court. So we've had conversations around different things that are happening in the courtroom, whether that's the role of the state's attorney, whether that's the judges' perspective and responsibilities, Aaron Wallace's conduct as a defense attorney, just some of the politics and relationships that are occurring in the courts. But these last two episodes have really taken a lens and highlighted what it's like to exist within the walls of a penitentiary. So much more highlighting prison culture, prison politics. In last week's episode, Aaron called it an ecosystem. He said Belmore or Belmont has his own ecosystem, a way in which all things work together. And we're really getting an opportunity to see that through this episode. Me, myself, personally, I have a personal relationship with incarceration as a juvenile and as an adult. So these scenes and episodes are more of a reminder for me of what it was like. So I'm not so foreign to some of the things that are being highlighted in the series. And we talked about last week the politics and the dynamics of what happens in a cafeteria or what they call a chow hall. And so this episode did the same thing, really highlighted some more things that are happening within the walls of a penitentiary that maybe isn't as known to others as it is for some of us who've lived those type of things before. Some of the things I noted when I was watching the episode today, and I want to say thank you right away to those who have joined the live and continue to join the live in this discussion. Really appreciate the continued support here at Herd of Life. We got one more week of finishing out this program. So thank you guys for continuing to support it. One of the things at the top of the episode, Aaron Wallace said right away, and we talked about it again last week. I think I find myself in the theme of really talking about how far we've come. But last week, it talked about how they count the days and how you need hope in prison, and how it truly is a day-to-day reality of what's happening in prison, and how we as a community needs to be more mindful of the reality of what it is to be institutionalized and incarcerated, that you live day to day. So then when you release, to be more mindful that we have to help people reprogram and reset what it is that is reality, because the reality of what it's like in prison is day to day. And Aaron talked about that right away. He said 12 years each day trying to figure out how to get to the next. And so I thought the episode really started off with a very strong statement to remind us that it is truly a day-to-day reality for individuals who are incarcerated in our prison system. And fast fact, 2.2 million people incarcerated in our American criminal justice system, and we incarcerate more of our own people than any other country. Thank you, William, as well, for the work that you're doing. You're greatly appreciated and admired. He was breaking down his case in the beginning of the episode with his roommate, and he talked about the things that he was going to level or argue with to try to get his case turned over. We talked about the rush to judgment, talked about the conflict of interest for the confidential informant. So things that we've discussed and in some of the other episodes. One of the things that was really riveting in this episode, and we felt the build up of this, was really the role of the captain. And he has really provided us with a very rich topic and subject. He's been a very rich subject for us to really be able to shine a light and say that the conduct in which we need to monitor in our justice system is not only the conduct of the individuals who are there convicted on a crime. That because we are all human beings and because we are all are subject to temptation, desperation, irrational and irresponsible choices, we all may fail our own moral, ethical codes at times, depending on the situation. And just because you're a part of the system doesn't mean you can't be corrupted as an individual, or don't live, don't make choices that are misconduct. Just because you work in the system don't make you above the system. Just because you enforce the law doesn't mean the law doesn't apply to you. But sometimes as criminal justice professionals, we carry that entitlement and think that the rules apply to them and not to us. And so in this case, the captain has been a big part of the drug operations. He's been a mule. He's been contributing to the perpetuation of the same type of mentalities and behavior that has gotten people in the institution in the first place. And it really actually causes me to boil a bit, because more than anything, what I desire is to do the work to help people who have made criminal choices to understand their belief sets and to challenge them to change their belief sets or evaluate their belief sets and move into a place where they are operating with a conduct and a behavior that wouldn't remove them from society or from their families again. But we in the system are failing our mission of rehabilitation when we have individuals on the inside who are contributing to the misconduct and the illegal behavior. So because the captain was one of those conduits for the perpetuation of that, in which incarcerates people in the mind and then in the body, he retired early. He was 2 years from a full pension and decided to retire. He's been there 32 years, and who knows how long the corruption has been occurring if he's been there 32 years. And this is not uncommon. This is not uncommon for people to work in the system a very long time, especially what they call the white shirts or the captains. Been in the penal system, the institutions, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and may have found themselves desensitized to the reality of the work that they're doing, or really just not truly connected to the real mission of our correctional system, which is to rehabilitate. Part of the distortion and part of our failure is that we operate within the system thinking that our only responsibility is to control and confine and contain, and that security is the chief concern and the priority, and contraband and control. When yes, we want to monitor those things, but we want to be people centered in a way that we can, when we release individuals from corrections to community, that they will be equipped to re-engage in community in a way that they can contribute to family and not recidivate. Another fun fact: 2/3 of the individuals that are released from prison return to prison within 3 years, and more than 50% of them return back to jail or prison within 1 year. So we're failing them on the inside, and we're not supporting them well enough on the outside. And part of that is because we have individuals in the system not connected to the mission of rehabilitation. They're more connected to control, confine, contain, or they may even have been compromised, and now they're contributing to the criminal activity and criminal mentalities. And that's what we were seeing with the captain in this series, and that is not an uncommon occurrence. I talked about this earlier in this program. There's more contraband brought into our institutions by the correctional officers than the actual individuals who are confined themselves. The drug trade, the drug traffic, the contraband, there's more smuggled in by working professionals in the system than the actual individuals who are been convicted and confined and called criminal. I want to say something really quick too, because I want to use this platform to change perspectives, hearts, and minds. A couple weeks ago, I talked about the concept of community justice and not just criminal justice. And community justice moves beyond the responsibility falling into the hands of our law enforcement officers, our judges, the people who work within the courts, prosecutors, defense attorneys, wardens when it comes to prisons, captains, correctional officers, probation officers, parole officers, all these criminal justice professionals. I think we as a community um, let ourselves off the hook from our responsibility to each other as neighbors and good people, that we think that the criminal justice issue is the responsibility of our law enforcement, our court officials, and our correctional officers. When and my belief and what I want to help us to come into a space of is this community responsibility of us having an obligation to each other, and the concept of community justice. And that community justice includes how we support people upon their release. It includes what type of practices we implement within the workplace and our work environment. It includes, practices that we implement as property owners. Property managers. So I know this rings a bell true to my friend William, who's here joining us and been my friend forever. So we need to have, level the playing field for individuals who have been incarcerated, because just because you made a poor choice doesn't mean you shouldn't still be fully entitled to all of the access of a normal citizen once you've served your time, right? Who agrees with me out there with that? Well, someone let me know that you agree with me in the comments. Certainly, just because you made a poor choice and you committed a crime, but once you pay your debt, once you do your time, you should be fully entitled to all the access to jobs, to voting, right, to full access to return to community and contribute at its fullness. So that's one concept I heard of life I really want to breathe into and get us to start talking about the understanding of community justice. Another thing that I'm beginning to wrestle with right now is how loaded the word criminal actually is. And if you look into the history of how our America has really loaded the perception of criminal and what is criminal, if you look into the history, you'll see that it's very much tied to the African American male. You'll see very much a racial disparity within our criminal justice system. You'll very much see a intentional attempt to still enslave Black American people with the criminal justice system. The 13th Amendment abolishes involuntary servitude except for by the punishment of crime. So now, if we as an America can heighten what is called criminal and incriminate, make things, certain ordinances or laws or whatever criminal, then we can actually return people back to this involuntary servitude. And then you got a whole bunch going on with the prison industrial complex and people making money off individuals in prisons and jail. I know I'm on a tangent. I'm going somewhere with this. I'm going to come back to the episode, but I also want to use this time to provide an education on how we can shift our perspective as community members. I think I'm feeling really convicted about just doing away with the word criminal. I don't think it serves my work at Hurdle Life for me to keep calling it the criminal justice system. I think we just need to move away from the word criminal, acknowledge it as the justice system, and then move into other concepts like community justice, which is way more neutral, not loaded, circular, holistic. Everybody's in the boat. It's not a us and them, it's an all of us. And so that's going to be a real work to do, because and in the higher education institutions where we learn about how to be professionals in our system, the major is called criminal justice. And I think we just I think there's an opportunity to have a conversation around just changing that language, that we're just talking about justice, and that we're just talking about harmony and peace, and we're really talking about really the higher things that'll cause us to have a life and a world and a community and a country we can be proud of. Because right now, the state of our system, the state of our community, the state of our politics, I don't know how many people are out there can really boast and say we're proud of who we are and what we're doing and where we're at. But we need voices like the ones we carry here at Hurdle Life to challenge what it is that was, and that we can come out of this time moving towards the things that we actually want to be. So I'm going to continue to be more intentional about not even using the word criminal when I'm describing the system, and we're just going to call it the justice system. I invite you into that change in language and culture for me with me as well. Aaron talked about in prison. He said there's always going to be tribes, retribution, and soul selling. He said it quick, but meditate on that a little bit. The tribes and the communities, and you can see all of the connectivity and the hierarchies within the prison culture. Retribution and soul selling, so much to feel there and think about when it comes to the inside the walls. This episode again was is different. I mentioned that it talks about it's inviting us into the walls, and so not a lot on some of the technical things, but certainly there still was the fact that Aaron is attempting to get a retrial, and he's right on the brink of getting what he's been asking for. He's talking to the potential witness on his case and says, my life depends on it. Some loaded words there. Things start to really, from the beginning, I was nervous. I can feel the things unraveling as the captain was retiring. And one thing I wrote down is that one piece moves and everything falls apart. So now all of a sudden, with the captain retiring because he's feeling pressure from the warden, but then the captain retires. Now Cassius doesn't have his mule, and a mule who's a captain, and I can just feel the tension beginning to unravel in this place. And we've seen how it ended at the end of the episode, but in the middle part there, we saw Cassius, his roommate, his friend, I don't know if it's Darren, but he got attacked. He got attacked in the kitchen. And he was like, well, what happened? He said, those chumps cleared out the kitchen. They must have paid off some guards. Think about that, too. Like how these things actually happen. There's so much control and a different reality where there's guards who are willing to forego their responsibility to actually provide security and safety, that they're compromised, they're paid off in some way, that they would clear out a kitchen that another individual would be attacked. Complete failure in our system and us as professionals that type of stuff occurs. It got so conflictual that he had to tell Aaron, get away from me. And I know that began to hurt. I know bother me when you're starting to see this real relationship begin to unfold because of the prison politics, where he's like, don't worry about me, just get away, I'm fine. And Aaron knows he's not fine, but they also know that with the nature of how things go, how things are, how the social code is enforced by violence and fear. Talked about that before as well. In prison, the social code is enforced by violence and fear. And knowing that or seeing that, we be more mindful upon people's release, how we have to rewire individuals to not engage in the way in which they had to engage or needed to engage in order to survive in the prison culture. So violence, that he was attacked for being associated with Aaron Wallace. He was attacked for not complying to the hierarchy of things, and you can feel the things begin to fall apart. There was a turning point where the warden saw where another individual who almost died from an overdose of fentanyl, and what they found under the tongue was a piece of Bible. And what they realized is that drugs were getting into the facility confiscated through religious material, and that they were soaking pages in in drugs, and so that caused the warden to then do a full sweep of the facility to confiscate religious materials, and that was very problematic and controversial. If all of the religious material is covered under the Freedom of Religion Act, I will speak into this a little bit and say that it is very important that religion and spirituality is protected, is allowed, is encouraged, because that keeps people sane, going, hopeful. It introduces you to a deeper part of yourself. It is so important that within our system that we allow people to have that freedom of religion. Absolutely, certainly. And we do a pretty good job of that in the system. I've seen that myself while being in the system. I know here in our county jail, there's community ministries that go in there and do their best to minister to individuals in county jail, prisons all across the country, always are open to that, and allow people to explore religion of their choosing as they should, and is very helpful. But when that is exploited, when that is being manipulated, and the responsibility of the warden is safety, individual safety, human safety, then there's a tough balance to strike when you've got evidence of manipulation and contraband or drugs being smuggled in through what is protected materials. Then what do you do? How do you go about that? And we saw how that needed to be worked out, and there was a full sweep of all the religious material. But man, that really shook some things up, because the individuals on the inside, they are fully aware of how the drugs are getting in, right? If they're injecting or ingesting and participating, they know that it's on Bible scriptures. They know it's on papers, and they know it's coming in steaks and or whatever else, whatever, all the stuff that's going on. So now when the individuals who are inside are seeing that the institutional authorities have sniffed out maybe the core of how they're running the operations, they feel like they've got a snitch on their hands, and then they start to begin to identify that Aaron Wallace is the only person close enough to maybe flip this off. And there's a manipulation there, because the captain in the episode then informed Cassius that it will only make sense that it was Aaron, even though it wasn't. She just investigated herself, and she found that soaked page with that individual who almost died. So she's just doing good investigative work. But all of a sudden, the manipulation and the control and the saving your own tail comes into play, and now things are really starting to get hot for Aaron Wallace as a potential snitch or rat in the situation. So all of a sudden, this thing is unraveling, and I can feel it from the beginning. I'm like, man, this thing is gonna blow up. So it's kind of tough to really know that something as beneficial holistically as spirituality and religion was manipulated and can be manipulated and does get manipulated in our system to bring in illegal substances that can cause harm. Drugs are not good, and this is not a PSA on not using drugs, but I mean, honestly, you've got to really take a honest look at your own intake and ingestions of legal and illegal drugs. And then things that are man-made, like some of these things that are circulating in our community, you just be wise to stay away from drugs. And we do need to do whatever measures we can to keep our institutions sober institutions. So, the fact that she made the decision to confiscate those religious materials to ensure that there are no drugs are getting in there, that's the appropriate choice. That's the appropriate choice. That's the right thing. Our institutions needs to be sober institutions where people can have full functioning of their minds and can heal themselves and heal their traumas. A lot of other stuff happening inside the weeds of in this episode. Aaron talked to the warden about quid pro quo. What's in it for me? Kind of eye, not an eye for an eye, but it's kind of quid pro quo means to a mutual exchange, and I just really have been entertained and being very intrigued by the relationship between Aaron and the warden, whose wife is running for attorney general against the current district attorney who put Aaron away, and with which we also found that maybe had a secret, silent motivation to targeting Aaron's club. You gotta listen close and watch close. Sometimes I don't know if this stuff plays on repeat or if this stuff is airing anywhere, but they're saying some key things that come into play whereby the individual, the lady, the girl who OD'd in Aaron's club, her father had great stake in the community, and the district attorney Maskin went after the club owner to try to get political favor. So to play in politics, people are willing to throw people's lives away to play politics. Not cool, not okay. So, look, things are coming out internally with that. One of Aaron's real good friends finally clearing his conscience and saying that it had nothing to do with Aaron, that he just couldn't do the time. Those things came out and came to play. Another thing that we saw was Jamal, and that was Aaron's roommate's name. Jamal had a lover, 3 years of not communicating, but Jamal is now in a space and place where he's going to make a decision. He told Cassius that he's going to actually take out Aaron Wallace, but as we can see in the end of the episode, he shifted gears and ended up trying to take out the shark himself, being Cassius. I'm going to wrap up here and close this thing out and just talk a little bit about how it ended, whereby what we seen was Jamal got ready for this battle. He got ready for this fight, and he put those magazines or phone books on his body, kind of to serve as a protective shield, almost like a bulletproof vest for shanks or knives in prison. So that is very common. Now, that wasn't new to me. Some people may have seen that for the first time, like, what's going on with the phone books? Absolutely, because if you're tempted to be stabbed in prison and you got this protective barrier, that's how they kind of armor up, is using those magazines and phone books. Also the salt. You can see he was collecting that salt, and then he ended up putting it in his pocket to really serve as kind of a distraction. So he threw it in the eyes of Cassius to really catch him off guard. And so inside, there's a lot of ingenuity for survival, for acts like that. One of the things that backfired, and I didn't get a chance to talk about this, so I'm glad I'm able to say it quickly here, is and when the old warden was at that prison, there was no weights. They were using body mass to work out. And the reason some institutions don't have weights is because of what you saw in the riot at the end, that the weights can be used as weapons. So some institutions have had so many violent attacks inside the prison that they no longer allow weights. Because as you can see, even though physical exercise and health and weights and machines and programs, all that's good for wellness, but in the blink of an eye, some of the things that are absolutely good for you, like a Bible, can be used to confiscate and ingest drugs. Some of the things that are good for you, like weights, can be used to hit somebody upside the head and kill them. And so it's a tough position, actually, that our professionals within the prisons and jails are up against, and I'm very empathetic towards them and towards that. I try to be very fair and objective about how hard it is for individuals to make tough choices, but I'm also I'm calling everyone to responsibility, community and the justice system professionals. We're all in it together. But yes, they have a tough job to decide what should be allowed and what should not be allowed for the sake of safety and security. So things blew up at the end there. Full riot. People were hurt. People were harmed. We're going to see how this thing really ends. I think I'm going to have to do some research to really figure out what happened to Isaac Wright Jr. because I don't think next week I'm going to really know what happened with his life. Like, did he get out? Like, I think he got out, but like, I was hoping that he did, but I'm just not sure anymore. But we're going to finish this thing out next week. One thing I wanted to talk about quickly. This is it. I promise. Aaron Wallace, his response after he saw the note from Jamal that says, whatever happens to me today, stay away from me in the gym. Jamal knew what he was going to do. He knew that he was going to not actually attack Cassius like he told him he would. I mean, like he told Cassius he would attack Aaron. But he knew that his loyalty was to Aaron and not to Cassius. And that he was going to manipulate Cassius, which he did. He shook his hand and said, just give me a piece and I'll take out Aaron because he's the snitch. But he knew that he was going to actually go for Cassius, go for the shark. So he, arranged a visit to say his goodbyes to his lover, and he was ready to go take out Cassius. And he told Aaron, stay away from me. And what I noticed in Aaron's response, and Aaron had a visitor. And when you're incarcerated, what matters the most is contact with the outside world through phone calls and through visitation. And so Aaron was ready to go to see his visitor. He didn't know it was his friend Darius, but you can assume, you can know that his family is someone very important because you know who's on your visitation list, and it's the people who matter and care about you the most. So all of a sudden, he's got this visitor who he's not expecting to be there, but then he gets this note. He gets this note from Darius to stay away from me, and Aaron knows that things are getting hot and getting tense, and he didn't think it through. He did not think it through. He went to survival mode, which happens, and his survival mode activated, his midbrain activated, and he went into fight, flight, or freeze, which was fight mode or flight mode in this case, and he didn't think things through. And this is what happens when you're dealing with trauma. This is what happens when you're put into unsafe environments. Your body and brain reacts in a way for survival only. And when it reacts in that way, when the brain activates in that way, the frontal cortex of your brain also minimizes, and you lose the ability to think fully logically or rationally or empathetically, because it made no sense, no rational and logical sense for him to forego his visit to his family to go into a dangerous situation, except for to help with a friend who's to survive. And then when you think about the weight of the choice that he had there, because his friend gave him a warning, he said, stay away. That was clear, but he completely disregarded the instruction to stay away. The rational, the responsible thing, he completely disregarded it. The rational and responsible thing to go to the visit room instead for his safety, he disregarded because he was activated. And it just triggered me to think about how trauma works, how the brain works. And I just thought that was a good indication to really demonstrate that how when you're activated, logic, empathy, and responsibility goes out the window. So that's kind of a call, a brief education into trauma, just very small. There's so much more in that. But to know that when people feel unsafe, when people are in survival mode, we want to have an empathy for the type of decisions they make in those type of environments, in those type of conditions, and what does it look like to be a survivor of some of these of traumatic events. So what we saw at the end, full out riot, that's definitely a traumatic event. There's going to be a response and a recovery from traumatic events, and there's a lot of education out there about trauma. If there's another thing that we talk about at Hurdle Life that is super important, that's being trauma informed. So comes some high level stuff outside of this episode thing that I talked about, which is cool, prison culture and stuff. We're talking about community justice. We're talking about moving away, eliminating the word criminal out of our conversations when it comes to the justice system. And another thing that I would say is really high level at Hurdle Life is talking trauma. So and how our system needs to be trauma informed and our community needs to be trauma informed. So there's great ways to get more information about how and where to be more trauma informed. I'm actually connected to a fellowship of trauma educators called South Dakota Aces and Resiliency. You can look that up. You can connect with me or the pages out there to connect with that type of work at Children's Home Society, Center for the Prevention of Child Maltreatment, all type of wonderful people that are connected with that. To move forward with the trauma education. I see Cassie is here as well and represents Children's Home Society and all of the trauma work that they do there. So, first time with the medium on my PC, so I can kind of see the time. I've never been able to see the timer all these times that I've done it. So I see that I'm at about 40 minutes now, which is fine because this is good. And we're going to talk this thing through, each time, whether it's 30, 35, 40 minutes, but not too much longer than that. I know this was intended to just be about a 30-minute talk chat each week. I come on about 10:10, and then we go for about 30 minutes or so. So we're wrapping up now. But for those who have been here, continue to be here. I appreciate the support, the conversations, the chats, the comments. We're going to do this one more week. The finale, check out the episode. We'll be right back here and continue to know that here at Hurdle Life, we're going to keep using our voices to advocate for that transformation in our criminal justice system and a person-centered approach at caring for individuals who are in transition, whether from incarceration, whether from homelessness, whether from our military, whether in the workforce, just all in it together. If there's a way that we can help people through hard times and adversities, that's what we are here for. That's what Hurdle Life is all about. So again, thank you. I'll see you all next week. Thank you for my friends who have been here, continue to be here. William, I love what you're doing. Lisa, I see you as well. I'm a big fan of the work happening there at AFP. And of course, Cassie couldn't have made it this far without you. So next week, same time, Tuesday, 9 o'clock is the episode, 10 o'clock, 10:05, 10:10. I'll be right back here at Hurdle Life. Peace out. Be safe. Keep social distancing. Wash your hands. And let's just be safe and take care of each other. Justice and harmony. Peace out.